All right, let's get this show on the road. Hello out there in the tubes of the internet. How's everybody doing today? Thanks for tuning in. This is my weekly astrological forecast this week in space. My name is John Emerson Bell. I'm an astrologer, coach, counselor, tarot reader, and sometimes radio show host. I hopefully will have a episode of the Melee Report, the long-awaited next episode of the Melee Report coming out for the Cancer new moon, which is occurring on Tuesday. Hopefully, I can get it released before then. So, yeah, if you're interested, you can find it on my SoundCloud at Camp Wizard Camp, and it comes out to my Patreons first. So if you're interested in getting my radio show delivered to you each and every week, or whenever I get around to doing it in these trying and turbulent times, as well as the coveted track listings, you can check out my Patreon. You can find that under Camp Wizard Camp as well. Good morning, my friend. Welcome, welcome on in. What else? Oh yeah. I am going to be co-facilitating a retreat, a dreaming retreat in Greece with the brilliant Sarah Janes. We are taking, or she is taking, deposits for the 2027 Oracular Dream Retreat. That's going to be going down in May. So if you're interested in going on a dream expedition, talking about oracles, oracular dreams, precognitive dreams, and a bunch of cool stuff like that, as well as mythology and astrology. You can check out at Sarah Jane's Dreaming on the Instagram or go to themysteries.org. And also, Sarah's been doing a bunch of great conversations with some brilliant people. There was one on magic last week, which unfortunately I wasn't able to go to, but I urge you all to check that out. So yeah, I'll put links to Sarah's website and Instagram in the show notes as well. And I think that's all the advertisements that I have. So yeah, without further ado, we can jump into the astrology of the week. And it's an interesting week in space because on one level, we don't have very much going on. There's a new moon in Cancer, which is kind of a big deal because we have Mercury retrograde pretty much conjunct that new moon. Um, and then not so many transits going on, but the ones that we are experiencing are kind of a big deal. We have the Neptune sextile to Uranus perfecting. Uranus is trine to Pluto perfecting. Pluto will perfect their sextile to Neptune next week. And then Jupiter will come into oppose Pluto, which has been dubbed Barbault's Basket and is all the rage on the social media these days. And so we'll kind of unpack that a little bit as we move through the show. All right. My friends, away we go. We were looking at this week in space for July the 13th, 2026 through July the 19th of 2026. Kicking it all off, Monday, July the 13th, we have Venus in Virgo squaring Uranus in Gemini. This is happening at 4 degrees and 18 arc minutes of these Mercury ruled signs. Let me share my screen so that folks at home can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so over here we got the chart for July 13th at this is at 8:26 a.m. That's Mountain Daylight Time. So this transit occurred a couple hours ago or perfected a couple hours ago, and we have Uranus over here at 4 degrees and 18 minutes of Gemini and squaring Venus down here at 4 degrees, 18 minutes of Virgo. And I clicked on my program these sort of wider aspect lines to show you the aspects as they get closer. The line gets wider. Maybe that's helpful. Maybe it's more confusing. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments. And yeah, we'll get to this situation a little later. That is the basket right there. Anyway. So, whew, Venus just entered Virgo last Thursday, July the 9th, and now Venus is in the sign of their fall. Wah, wah. Planets in fall have a hard time because they are under-resourced, and their go-tos tend to not work so well. And also to get used against them. So Venusian qualities of beauty, congeniality, conversation, relationship building, tend to kind of fall flat. And so planets in disability need to work harder to get their needs met and to achieve their goals. They also need to get more creative about how they find resources and take care of business. And I think that this can actually be very beneficial in the long run because when th things come easy all the time, we kind of take them for granted and we kind of, I don't know, we stop trying or stop thinking about it. We don't have to work so hard. Like things just like happen in a specific way in our life, and we're like, yeah, that's good. And then if they don't happen as easily, then we're kind of stuck if our go-tos get shut down. And so planets in disability and their need to get creative around resourcing can be really beneficial because it kind of urges us to think about things in different ways and to try new solutions to be able to solve the problem of how we resource ourselves. So this square is occurring between two Mercury ruled signs, making Mercury what is called the dispositor of this square. Mercury happens to be retrograde right now, and I don't know if y'all have been feeling that, but Mercury being retrograde and presiding over this square kind of adds a new level of unpredictability to the situation, also another layer of miscommunication and misconnections to a already kind of potentially erratic transit. And I'm saying that because Uranus is involved, and Uranus is a planet that deals with sudden, unpredictable change, the desire for freedom and liberation. Uranus seeks to break free of old forms and to create something innovative and new. Uranus is looking towards the idealized vision and it strives to attain that ideal. And in doing so, it can burn down or blow up anything that doesn't live up to that vision, anything that isn't good enough. Uranus will be like, fuck it, get rid of it. Next. Okay, going for this thing. Oh, that's not as good as I wanted. That's not meeting up with this ideal. Like, blow it up, get rid of it. Next. So, Venus deals with relationships, aesthetics, pleasure, love, values, all that good stuff. In Virgo, which is an earth sign, Venus is interested in refining and perfecting these Venusian qualities of life. Here, Venus focuses on the details in order to get things right or to make things better. And this can be a difficult place for Venus because nothing may ever be good enough for them in Virgo. And this is sort of why Venus is in fall here. This is how Venus operates in fall is, oh, I want this relationship to be a certain type of way and it's not good enough. And if I just work harder, maybe it will get better. Or it's never good enough. It's never good enough. Or they might feel like they're not beautiful enough or good enough or valuable enough to have things that Venus wants. And that can be a painful trap to get caught in. Oh, if I only lost X amount of weight. Oh, if I only was a little bit taller. If only I was a baller. If only if I had a girl, if I did, I would call her, you know? So we can get in this trap of like, I'm not good enough. It's not good enough. I need to work harder, or it's just not the thing that I picture in my mind. And I think that that's sort of a losing battle and requires us to sort of let go of the idealized perfection and not let good enough or not let perfection be the enemy of good enough. You know what I'm saying? So with the uh, with the desire for Venus and Virgo to perfect and Uranus's drive for the ideal, we may run into some trouble accepting how things are in the present moment. And the square may create some feelings around the idea of settling or being good enough or allowing ourselves to want what we want. Uranus square Venus can bring with it a desire for excitement, novelty, and a desire to change existing aesthetics or relationship patterns or structures. However, Virgo is a earth sign, which is focused on the pragmatic and the practical elements of our lives. There may be a need for a change, adventure, or excitement that Uranus brings, but Venus in Virgo may not want to rock the boat or disrupt the stable qualities of life that are created by a relationship or a routine. We may feel a lot of tension around the desire for the new and a need for for the stable and the practical. And this is what a square brings, is this sort of tension between these two planets' internal mechanisms or their desires. And I've heard it described as like two cars coming to a stop sign at the same moment. And who's going to lead the way? Is the Uranus desire for excitement and adventure and novelty going to run the show, or is Venus and Virgo's desire to be of service, to keep things grounded and practical and to take care of the details going to lead the show? So this square will ask us to recognize and honor these feelings within ourselves in order to find a place of integration, which can lead to personal growth. Another component of this transit is that Uranus asks for freedom and liberation. There may be some desires that Venus holds that Uranus is pushing us to acknowledge. However, Venus in Virgo may not feel very comfortable acknowledging or expressing these desires. Virgo is the sign associated with the image or archetype of the Virgin, which has two kind of opposing meanings. The traditional meaning of virgin was a woman who was unmarried and thus belonged to herself and was not beholden to anyone else. The more current understanding of a virgin is a person who's not sexually initiated. And that has taken on concepts of chastity and purity, which I think purity is kind of a problematic idea. Well, this is a very different meaning than the original understanding of the concept of the virgin, because of the culture and societal context that we exist in. I think it influences the way that Venus and Virgo is perceived and how it is embodied. If Uranus comes to liberate desire in this square, there may be some pushback from Venus in this sign, which may feel resistant to exploring desires and urges because of the ways it might destabilize the practical aspects of life or how it might be perceived by the external world. Uranus's urgings toward liberation and the ideal may help Venus to wake up to the ideas of the virgin not as one who is like chaste and pure, but as one who is self-possessed. And the desire as an offering or a way of honoring instead of something that should be hidden, rejected, or carry shame. Uranus squaring Venus may also lead to shakeups in our value system. And what we value tends to be what we prioritize. And while Venus in Virgo is interested in beautifying the down to earth nuts and bolts of life, the practical matters might be disrupted during this transit, which creates space for other values and areas of importance to emerge. And the other ideals that come up or come to the forefront of our thinking, we can honor that and make space for that and see how that might activate desire within our system. Another component of Virgo is order and cleanliness, which can also be confused with idealistic ideas of purity. But on the other side of all that order is a mess. And Uranus in Gemini holds both sides of the equation. And Gemini is interested in opening things up and like pulling everything out so that one can see the fundamental components of what things are composed of. With Uranus here, this can happen in pretty sudden and radical ways. So whatever mess Venus and Virgo is holding might become exposed during this transit. And we might need to learn to embrace the mess or bless this mess as a way towards liberation instead of seeking to repress it to keep up appearances or to maintain order. Again, with Mercury in retrograde in Cancer being the dispositor of this square, again, Mercury ruling both Virgo and Gemini, there may be slowdowns, missteps, and miscommunications around situations that may either lead to blowups or shifting dynamics, and or that might result in misconnections and internal confusions, which might create messy situations. Mercury in Cancer is connected with emotional intelligence and the emotions that pull us into life and cause us to take action. It might be helpful to check in with ourselves and with our feelings and intuition to see what feels right for us as we move through the early part of the week. Venus and Virgo may have a tendency to overanalyze things, which can lead to paralysis. And Uranus and Gemini can just flip the table to see what happens. So, if possible, see if you can tune into the intuition and what feels alive in the heart and in the wisdom of the gut to help you to navigate this sort of moment of tension authentically and ideally skillfully. Which brings us to Tuesday, July the 14th. We have a new moon in Cancer occurring at 21 degrees and 59 arc minutes. That cardinal water sign. This is occurring at 2:43 in the AM Pacific time, making that 5:43 AM Eastern time. So let me pull that chart up. So, this new moon will be occurring pretty early tomorrow morning. It will be, reaching its the sun moon conjunction overnight tonight. So here we see the moon and sun both at 21 degrees and 59 arc minutes of Cancer. And then we have Mercury, who is retrograde. You can tell it's retrograde by that red number right there at 19 degrees and 50 minutes of Cancer. So pretty dang close within 2 degrees. And so I think Mercury being retrograde will play a pretty big role in this lunation. Good morning, Troy. Nice to see you, my friend. So let's talk about this new moon. This new moon is occurring in the moon sign of Cancer. Good thing. A new moon is a moment of rest as well as an opportunity to plant seeds for the next cycle. The moon represents the waxing and waning of our emotions as well as the rhythms of our lives. With a new moon in Cancer, there's the opportunity to reset our rhythms and to tune into the feelings that are operating under the surface of our daily life. Cancer is the sign of cardinal water. This is sort of the wellspring that initiates action and movement into the world based on what we care about and what we are feeling. It is the source of the emotional waters that operate in our lives. And with this new moon, it provides a moment to tune into the sort of headwaters of our feelings and to tend to them. With Mercury retrograde in this sign and sitting just 2 degrees away from this new moon, there's also a there's also a component of needing to tune in to our inner world and to gather some information from what is coming up from these emotional headwaters or the emotional wellspring, and to kind of gather some information from that. There's also a component of vulnerability with cancer because what we care about can be taken away. And so there is a desire to protect what is important to us and what we care for the most. With this new moon and the Mercury retrograde, there's a call to turn inwards and to tune into the things that we care most about and the vulnerable places that our care can lead us to. And I think that there's a lot of information in vulnerability because when we tap into that, it also points us to, oh, I really care about this. I care about my safety. I care about my connection. I care about how I'm perceived. I care about, my money or my security or my stability. I care about my loved ones. All these things that we can care about, they can be signaled by that sense of vulnerability when we're like, oh no, need to protect that, or I'm in fear, or I'm activated by the thought that I might lose these things, or these things might be threatened. And so these places that we reflexively seek to protect give us a lot of information about what we really care about. And so there's a lot of valuable information in the feeling of vulnerability. And although it's uncomfortable, it can guide us to the things that are the most important to us. And as we recognize these places of deep care and vulnerability, it can help to inform us as to how we choose to move forward and how we support and nurture the things that we care for deeply. So this is a really good time to turn our attention inward to the sort of tide pools of our soul and to consider the things that we are cultivating and nurturing there and the things that we want to put our emotional energy into to both protect and to help grow. And this will help us to shape the next lunar cycle as we navigate this shifting world and move closer to eclipse season, which will kick off with the total solar eclipse on the next moon on August 12th. So this is the last new moon before eclipse season begins. We have the next full moon, and then we move into eclipse season. So those are a couple of my thoughts on the Cancer new moon, which again is happening late tonight and early tomorrow morning. All right, let's move along to Wednesday, July the 15th. Let me pull this up. Okay, on Wednesday, July the 15th, we have Uranus in Gemini, sextile Neptune retrograde in Aries, and this is occurring at 4 degrees and 23 minutes. And this is kind of an important one. We have this, where is it? We have Neptune right here at 4 degrees and 23 minutes of Aries, and that is in a sextile aspect to Uranus right here at 4 degrees and 23 minutes of Gemini. It is also in a sextile aspect to Pluto at 4 degrees and 33 minutes of Aquarius, Pluto being retrograde, and will come into an exact sextile, I believe, next week. And then we have Uranus over here trining Pluto, both of them at 4 degrees, and that will be exact on the 17th. And then we have Jupiter right here in a building opposition to Pluto. Jupiter in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius. And this is this sort of aspect pattern and formation is what has been called Barbault's Basket. We also have Jupiter coming into a trine with Neptune. So let's talk about this. So today, or on Wednesday, July the 15th, we have the third of 5 exact sextiles between Uranus and Neptune. The first two happened on August 28th and November 20th, respectively, of 2025. And the last time these planets were sextile was 1966 to 1968, when Uranus was in Virgo and conjunct Pluto, and Neptune was in Scorpio during that time. And so this was also a time of revolution and change around the world, which may have been spurred on by the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Now we have a much different celestial configuration, with the outer planets in supportive trines and sextile aspects all occurring at 4 degrees of fire and air signs. This configuration has been dubbed Barbault's Basket after the work of the French mundane astrologer André Barbault, who looked at the distribution of outer planets, including Saturn and Jupiter, around the zodiac to predict what he saw as times of turbulence and times of stability. Based on this system, Barbault accurately predicted major world events, including the fall of the Soviet Union, which occurred during the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction in '89, and the COVID-19 pandemic, which happened during the Saturn-Pluto conjunction back in 2020. I found an article on the website Time Price Research, which is from March 15th of 2012, and that's entitled André Barbault's Cyclical Index of Global Tension, Conflict, and War. And this article talks about Barbault's predictions and the way he was able to graph outer planet distributions to make his predictions. And I'll put references to everything that I reference today in the show notes. But according to this article, Barbault's core hypothesis posits that when the outer planets cluster together in the same region of the sky, a phenomenon driven by multiple concurrent conjunctions, the sum of his graph drops significantly, creating a deep trough. These low points reflect conditions of turbulence, intense global tension, and major wars. As the graph ascends, it indicates the planets are moving towards oppositions, leading to peaks. These peaks typically coincide with periods of international stability, economic expansion, and general optimism. The logic is that the concentration of these heavy planetary energies focuses collective human experience into a narrow, pressurized window, leading to collapse of old orders. All right. So how Barbault's basket shows up is sextile aspects between Neptune and Aries and both Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius. Uranus and Pluto are in a trine to each other, and Jupiter in Leo is moving into an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, forming a basket-shaped aspect pattern, which for the folks on the YouTube, you can see over hither. Um, Barbault saw this distribution of outer planet trines and sextiles as a signifier of a time of stability and coherence. However, because we are dealing with large cycles of time, I don't think that this will occur suddenly. Rather, this planetary configuration, which will be in effect for quite some time, may create these circumstances for conditions to shift to a period of greater balance and collective optimism, which sounds great right about now. This planetary configuration is an extension from the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which occurred back in February, and which has kind of characterized the collective vibe and global events through the first half of 2026. I don't see the collective situation doing a sudden 180, but this is a sign of possible emergence of stabilizing factors in otherwise chaotic time. The most active times for this basket configuration are July 15th through 24th, with Jupiter forming with Jupiter's opposition to Pluto perfecting on July 19th through 20th. So this celestial configuration is occurring between air and fire signs, which are both active elements. They are outward moving and bring activity and action. If we look at the elemental relationship of air and fire, fire heats air and causes the molecules to vibrate. And so as they vibrate, the air molecules collide into each other, which causes more space and allows for expansion. More space causes less density. So when the air is heated, the volume is increased, but the density decreases. So things may move quicker and bigger, but feel less dense and more diffuse. However, if the air is trapped in a container, like say a basket, it creates an increase in pressure. And so we might get situations where there is just a lot of grandiosity, inflation, and hot air blowing around. And we also might feel situations of increased pressure. However, ideally, things are elevated through this relationship. On the other end of the equation, fire needs air to breathe and to live. However, too much air can blow out a fire or it can cause it to grow in size and to spread with deadly and destructive consequences. And, both air and fire have a quality of volatility to them, and especially when they come together. However, in these supportive aspects like trines and sextiles, however, I hope that we get the right relationship and the right air-fire ratio, and we get a steady fire that can be used for illumination and the elevation of the collective, but only time will tell. And we'll be talking more about this in the coming weeks as this aspect pattern continues to build and stabilize. But in the case of the sextile between Uranus and Neptune, which perfects today, or on Wednesday. Neptune and Pluto, which is exact for the first time since the mid 80s on July the 24th. Sextiles are harmonious aspects, but they require some work to activate them. We need to take action to seize the day in order to make anything out of a sextile, which kind of functions like a astrological flirt. If no one takes action in that moment, the shared glance just fades into the past. In the case of outer planets like Uranus and Pluto, they deal with larger generational, global, societal, and cultural movements, which feels very distant from the individual and removed from the individual's ability to take action to activate a sextile aspect. However, while the outer planets tend to describe the collective conditions that impact individuals at a personal level, we all carry our own unique signature and personal relationship to these conditions. And we can work to have agency and activate the support of the Uranus and Neptune parts of ourselves at a personal level. And if consciousness is a field, in that the individual exists within consciousness and consciousness doesn't reside within the individual, then our actions on the level of the personal or microcosm have an impact on the collective field or fabric of consciousness in the macrocosm. So, with the sextile between Uranus, who strives towards the ideal and disrupts old systems to create space for innovation and change, and Neptune, the planet of ecstatic experience, which dissolves structures and blurs boundaries. Neptune is also associated with dreams, fantasy, and spirituality, and they recognize the interconnected nature of all things and longs for a return to the source and to merge with the everything. So this aspect may create some radical shifts in belief, as well as boundaries and borders. Again, I don't see this happening overnight, but one may want to consider one's own belief system and what that is based on. Perhaps the foundations of our beliefs need to be disrupted and updated in order to bring us more in line with the idealized vision that we are trying to live into. And if that's the case, what actions might we want to take on an individual level to begin to give shape to that vision that we have for ourselves as well as for the collective? During the period of these sextiles, which lasts into next year, we may be asked to open our minds to new possibilities and ways of experiencing the world. Old belief structures may dissolve or be upended, which opens space for innovation and discovery. We also may find desire for ecstatic experience that pulls us out of old forms of being and perceiving, helping to shift the perspective and our understanding. Ecstatic experience pulls us out of our ego construct and helps us to connect to the larger collective body, or what Jung called the self. These experiences can shift perspective and help us to move beyond outdated constructs and structures, which can lead to breakdowns, but also breakthroughs on both individual and collective levels. This may lead to a shift in ideals as well as the fantasy and dream that we hold. Neptune is a planet of glamour and illusion. Issues of celebrity and the idealization of the wealthy are part of this Neptunian fantasy. As radical Uranus moves into this aspect with Neptune, there is a potential to disrupt this fantasy of fame and fortune and wealth and to give space for new collective ideals to emerge. However, with these sextiles and trines, this is also a collaborative aspect occurring between the planets and signs involved, which may have the effect of maintaining some of the elements of cultural and collective systems. But whenever Uranus is involved, things become unpredictable, and the best advice is to expect the unexpected. And again, this will unfold over a period of time while this kind of basket formation is exact now. I see this more as a seeding moment and the beginning of a longer shift, which I think will unfold over the next several years, which brings us to Friday, July the 17th, where we have Uranus in Gemini, trine Pluto, retrograde in Aquarius. This is occurring at 4 degrees and 29 arc minutes. And let me go pull this up on the chart. So over here we have, where do we have this? Okay, we have Pluto over here in retrograde in Aquarius at 4 degrees and 29 arc minutes, and that is making the exact trine to Uranus over here in Gemini at 4 degrees and 29 arc minutes. And you can see that they're both still in that sextile to Neptune. Um, and then, yeah, again, Jupiter will move into oppose Pluto exactly next week. So, the last time Uranus and Pluto were in a trine aspect was from 1921 to 1922. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to do the research around what was going on in 21 and 22, but I offer that to y'all if you want to do that on your own. And during 1921, 1922, Uranus and Pluto were both in water signs. A trine occurs between planets in the same element. And that was the closing trine, the 240-degree trine. Then Pluto and Uranus were conjunct in Virgo in 1965 through 1966. And now they are forming their opening trine. And this is occurring in air signs. And so here we have Uranus, the planet of change, in harmonious aspect with Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, and transformation. Again, Uranus strives to achieve the ideal, and Pluto strips things away. Uranus is connected with the Titan Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and brought it to humans so that humanity could live up to the potential that Prometheus, who is our creator in mythology, saw for us. And so we can kind of trace the path of humans accessing fire to all of the technological innovation that we have ever experienced, including the development of language, writing, printing, the transmission of information, radio, television, as well as transportation. The development of the computer and computing, and as well as large language models and the development of artificial intelligence. Now, all that sounds great, but the shadow side of technological innovation is that it brings with it periods of destabilization as new technologies become integrated into our brains and our ways of life. And there is a relationship between technological innovation and destruction, which has been mapped throughout time. And every time there is a technological leap, it is usually followed by a period of upheaval, chaos, and conflict, which acts as both a collective initiation as well as a composting of old systems and belief structures. But old systems and beliefs don't often go easily. So Pluto is a planet of power. And in Aquarius, the sign of the collective, it is highlighting how power is held within the context of the collective. Aquarius is a Saturn ruled sign, and it speaks to what is inside the wall, Saturn being the limit or the wall. And so Aquarius speaks about what is inside the wall and what is also outside the wall. And the way the world is currently structured, there is a small amount of people holding most of the global resources who have isolated themselves within a wall of wealth and are currently creating doomsday bunkers to protect themselves against the masses who are on the outside and looking in and needing to make do with the scraps left over from the elites who have consolidated power and wealth into a small percentage of the global population. There was a article by Collapse Astrology, who wrote this excellent essay on Medium entitled "The Hole in Barbault's Basket," which is a really well-researched article on historical developments surrounding the mundane astrology of this moment, as well as Chiron's role in Barbault's Basket. Um, I'm not going to talk about Chiron in this, but if you're interested in Chiron's role in this configuration, I urge you to read that article. It's pretty dang good. But I wanted to read a quote from this article on Pluto, on the Pluto-Uranus trine, which I think is a pretty astute observation. And so Collapse Astrology writes, Uranus trine Pluto is, in my opinion, where the heart of the issue lies. If Pluto represents the war machine and Uranus represents big tech, a trine between them describes the things that we already know is happening. They are working together in harmony, lifting each other up. There's an extremely overt example of several big tech executives being inducted into the military at high ranks back in 2025. But there's also Izzy's horrific AI quadcopters and AI assassination programs, the techno fascist experiment beginning in Gaza, the creation of a vast surveillance system and database, the accelerated exploitation of rare earth minerals, new weapons technologies like direct energy weapons, cops using robot dogs, and countless other examples, many of which the public doesn't even know about. Sounds pretty bleak. And so, while trines are harmonious aspects, we have two planets collaborating or conspiring with each other. In this case, we have those with power, the billionaires, oligarchs, politicians, and the Epstein class, conspiring with techno-feudalists to continue their project of consolidating power, wealth, and resources, and employing massive resources through surveillance, intimidation, and violent oppression to maintain control. This either continues in this direction or it creates an equal and opposite action from the collective. As the Plutonian elements of control bear down on the Aquarius collective, it seems like awareness is beginning to shift. The cover up of the Epstein files, accelerating inflation, ICE abductions and killings, mistrust of AI, and a rejection of data centers are all signs of a shift of shifting collective values and a weakening of the grip that power has on the masses. However, none of these things seem like they have reached a tipping point just yet. Pluto describes power, but not how power is used or allocated. Humans have become used to top-down systems of power organization, hierarchically organized systems that and trickle down economics. But with Pluto and Aquarius, my hope is uh, that this shifts in a more lateral form of power exchange and power sharing, having power with instead of power over. Even though on one level, the trine from Uranus to Pluto can represent a continued harmonious relationship between those who conspire to hold power over the collective, it also may represent the beginning of a shift where collective movements mobilize to change existing systems and the way that power is organized. With this basket formation and Neptune involved in these aspects, there is also an element of belief that plays a big role in how things unfold. With this aspect pattern, belief systems may be disrupted, upended, or forced to transform. With Neptune in Aries, and this whole thing kind of kicks off with the Saturn Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries, which occurred back in February. And with Neptune in Aries, there is a dissolving of a sense of identity, and long held beliefs are called into question. Things like the American dream, which is evaporating rapidly, or the idea of America as the great liberator fighting for truth and justice around the world. And as this veil gets pulled back and the true nature of the effect of American power is revealed, it may cause a reevaluation of the idealized vision that people have constructed about America. And I think that the 4th of July Great American Fair debacle was a really appropriate image of this. Empty fairgrounds, collapsing stages, melted ice cream, a stagnant reflecting pool, and a neo-Nazi march. The shifting of the collective belief as we continue to confront the cognitive dissonance of the current state of the American experiment may lead to transformations in the collective mythos and an update of the core narratives that we hold as a point of orientation. It also might lead to fragmentation, conspiracy theories, and nihilism as a response to the shifting paradigm. The fragmentation of belief and the disruption of a coherent belief system is an interesting component in this astrological configuration. The author Daniel Pinchbeck who wrote Breaking Open the Head, just wrote an article on his Substack entitled Psychedelic Entities and Demonic Politics, which is a very interesting take on entity encounters in psychedelic states and the drawback of scientific materialism in psychedelic research. Anywho, in the essay, he writes, because the state no longer coerces allegiance to a single structured belief and multiple worldviews compete in a market, the social base that once made a single religious canopy taken for granted has dissolved. In such a circumstance, one ends up with many half-formed belief systems without a dominant plausibility structure. Individuals are left to construct their own private, often inconsistent versions of reality. Yet in the US, the rise of Christian ethno-state nationalism, we are seeing an effort to reinstate a monological structure of belief and fealty via indoctrination or mind control. He goes on to say, my deep concern is that psychedelics are being recontextualized and will be deployed as part of that effort, not as an instrument of awakening, but as accelerants of conversion and indoctrination into a new ideological prison the regime seeks to impose. In the US, we are witnessing a bizarre alignment between the technological and financial elite, the political right, Christian nationalism, and the psychedelic movement. And I see the psychedelic renaissance as another signature of the Pluto-Uranus trine. Again, their conjunction occurred in 1965 to 66, and this is what could be seen as a seeding moment for the psychedelic movement of the 1960s. And the first Uranus Pluto conjunction was on October 9th of 1965. And the first acid test by Ken Kesey was a month later on November 27th of 1965. Pretty interesting. However, now that Uranus and Pluto have moved into a trine aspect in a sextile to Neptune, I think that things are a little different than the kind of psychedelic revolution of the 60s. And what Pinchbeck writes about is another form of the consolidation of power and surveillance culture to use psychedelics as a mechanism for control instead of an instrument of liberation. And it's interesting that information about the CIA's MK Ultra program was just released, and their use of LSD in mind control experiments in the 60s was just came to light. However, I think that psychedelics are too powerful and unpredictable to be contained in a laboratory or owned by a pharmaceutical company. In the 60s, LSD jumped the wall of the laboratory, aided by the trickster Timothy Leary. And let's not forget that Uranus was a trickster. All of this to say that Pinchback's point about the breakdown of collective belief structure and the competing views fueled by the web of the internet is representational of collective fragmentation as well as a desire for a new organizing principle, which this multi-year trine may help usher in. Besides power, Pluto is also a planet of transformation, which occurs through initiation. Pluto pulls us down into initiation through confrontation with our fears, survival drives, and shadow material. Initiation often replicates a death experience, so that old, outdated, and oftentimes immature parts can symbolically die. However, this process requires a structure for integration so that something new can be reborn. Without that holding structure, initiation can be experienced as a trauma and can result in fragmentation. Something that is important to remember is that traditional processes of initiation were designed not for the individual, but for the community. The purpose of initiation was to bring the individual into the community context so that they could accept their role as a member in the collective body that was bigger than any one individual unit, which is a very Aquarian ideal. All this talk about collective belief and Barbault's Basket reminds me of Ursula K. Le Guin's brilliant essay, The Carrier Bag of Fiction, which I've referenced on this show before. In that essay, she basically makes the point that culture honored the active heroic ideal because it made a better story. But without a container, the receptive principle, we cannot hold, keep, or maintain anything. She writes, for what's the use of digging up a lot of potatoes if you have nothing to lug the ones you can't eat home in? Before the tool that forces energy outward, we made the tool that brings energy home. She continues saying, we've all heard about the sticks and spears and swords, the things that bash and poke and hit with, the long, hard things, but we have not yet heard about the things to put things in, the container for the things to be contained. That's a new story. That is news. She goes on to say, if it is a human thing to do, to put something you want because it is useful, edible, or beautiful into a bag or basket, or a bit of rolled bark or leaf, or a net woven of your own hair, or what have you, and then take it home with you. Home being another larger kind of pouch or bag, a container for people. And then later on, you take it out and eat it, or share it, or store it up for winter in a solider container or put it in the medicine bundle of the shrine, or put it in the medicine bundle, or the shrine, or the museum, or the holy place, the area that contains what is sacred. Then next day, you probably do much of the same again. If to do that is human, if that's what it takes, then I am a human being after all, fully, freely, gladly, for the first time. And one more quote, she continues on saying, maybe the trouble is we've all let ourselves become part of the killer story, and so we may get finished along with it. Hence, it is with a certain feeling of urgency that I seek the nature, subject, words of the other story, the untold one, the life story. This astrological basket is a cradle, a container that helps to hold the collective tension and to carry something with us. And the real question is, what do we fill the basket with? What are the ideals and desires that we want to hold and maintain, to bring home and share, or to offer to the greater container of the sacred places in our world? We get to choose, individually and collectively, what we decide to fill this vessel with, the things we want to keep and store, and what we want to discard, to leave behind, to let rot on the earth's floor so they can become compost to provide fertile soil for a future time. It will require a shifting of ideals to carry all of what we are holding to someplace useful. In this carrier bag of Barbault's basket, there is an opportunity to support the process of collective reorganization and transformation, but it will require a willingness to let things go and a discernment around what is worth keeping and preserving in order to hold what is valuable and nurturing. We may need to shift long held beliefs as well as the ways that we center or decenter ourselves in relationship to the collective and the living world that we are all embedded in. And with that, my friends, thank you so much for your attention and for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. I hope that this was helpful for somebody out there. Yeah, I'm available for tarot and astrology readings. If you are interested, you can find me on Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard. Send me a DM. We can figure something out, or you can find me through my website, campwizardcamp.com. And yeah, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. I'm gonna stick on the Instagram for a minute more to see if anyone has any questions. And with that, I will bid you all a fond farewell. And until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. Bye now.